Welcome into the latest Betting Weekly Fast Break on this hump day. I'm Doug Kezirian alongside professional handicapper Wes Reynolds as we are set to break down the WNBA. One game on the slate tonight. We'll get into that. We'll also get into some futures markets with the trade deadline tomorrow. And we've already seen a couple interesting transactions with teams making a push to go for this title, which seems a lot more wide open than we've seen in recent years. I would say more teams have a legitimate chance to win the title. Wes, how are you on this Wednesday?
I'm well, Doug. Good card last night in the WNBA. Shorter one today, but you're right. The deadline tomorrow, and we'll see. We've seen some of the contenders already make deals. If some of the teams behind will make deals, Minnesota Lynx, by the way, nice win in the rally around the fallen hero spot with Fee's first game that she was missing, and they pull out a late win in Seattle.
Yeah, the Storm had not lost back-to-back games all season, and now they've lost three straight, and they were favored in all three because they were all three at home. So surprising turn, but this is a team that also went out and got Brittany Sykes, an all-star, and I think it's a fantastic move, exactly what they need. Erica Wheeler just not doing it and getting it done at the point guard spot. I feel like this team needs a little edge, needs some shooting, and I think it's a nice piece. We'll see, though, if they're a true contender. They're in that sort of third tier after the second tier has like the Mercury and maybe the Dream. So we'll see about that. But we do have one game tonight. We'll get into some futures, the playoff markets, things along those lines, because it's competitive for that 7-8 seed to get in to the postseason. So the Las Vegas Aces and Golden State Valkyries run it back, as they say in the basketball world tonight. Vegas, a 5.5-point road favorite after smacking the Valkyries. The over-under 158. And by the way, if you like what you see here on the channel, sign up for the newsletter. Get exclusive tips and free Insider magazine. Sign up for free at bettingweeklystudios.com. And Wes, I think the only side I would play here would be the dog, the home dog. Now, the Valkyries aren't the team they've been all season, right? They lose their best player, Kayla Thornton, out for injury, out for the rest of the season with a knee injury. But the spot screamed aces on Sunday after they get smoked by about 50 at home to the Lynx. So it was a good bounce back spot, good spot to play them. But I think the spot here is the Valkyries as a home dog here at Valhalla.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, and the market certainly doesn't either. I think there was some sixes out there on the opener, and now you're seeing as low as some five. Bet Rivers 5.5 in the market minus $1.09 juice to the Aces. And look, both these teams are 7-8 right now in the playoffs. The Golden State Valkyries would still be in. Sparks just one game back. Another big win for the Sparks over the Fever last night. By the way, they're 3-0 against the Indiana Fever this year. Put over 100 on Indiana last night. So they're kind of coming a little bit. Washington, I still think is trying, but you mentioned about the Brittany Sykes trade. Washington's going with the youth movement, and I don't think that they're just thinking about this year. I think they're trying to assemble a core long term. And they're thinking big picture in Washington, which I think is smart. By the way, they're 13-16, so they're 1.5 back from the Valks, who are currently in the 8th spot. But yeah, this would only be Golden State for me, and I think it wasn't just the fact that they got blown out by the Lynx on Saturday, but I think the Aces, they really wanted that game on Sunday, because I'm sure Becky Hammon is hearing the, wow, they really miss Natalie Nakaze here, and they do. That's not the only reason that the Aces are just barely over 500, but I'm sure Becky was hearing that, and they were ready to play off that horrible loss where she pulled the starters very early in the third quarter against Minnesota, and they were well rested, and they just took it to the Valks on Sunday.
Okay, so focusing on this game, 5.5. You said it. I agree that it's the only side. I'm not playing it. I want like 6.5. What's it going to take for you to get involved in this game on the side?
Similar, because I feel like I did miss the boat here, and I don't want to necessarily chase a bad number, even though I feel like the Valkyries are probably the right side here. So, just to sleep, I didn't get the opener here, so no, I'm not going to be taking 5 or 4 if this goes even the 4.5. So Yeah, I would need 6.5 or as close as I could get to 7. And the only thing I think that will probably change that direction is if there is some kind of injury. We know that Billings is out for the Valks, Thornton, of course, out for the season. I did see Zandolicini and Hayes as questionable on the injury report here, but yet the Valks still getting the action. So they're shorthanded, I think, anyway. And all these WNBA teams are really shorthanded because they only play about 9 because you can only have a certain amount of players on the roster. That's why you see these hardship contracts and all that stuff. So same for me. I would need about 6.5.
Okay. So let's take a step away. You talked about 4 and so let's 5.5. The market was 6, 6.5. You think that this is a fair number? I mean, I'm inserting some of my own thoughts here. I think this is a fair number. The Valkyries would be the only side because I do think there's a home court advantage. I do think Sunday's game was influenced by outside factors like you touched on, the Aces coming off that blowout loss. So Valhalla should be rocking. While some of those players are key, like Tiffany Hayes, Zandalicini, the Valkyries have depth. They feel like they just reload. But at some point, they just don't have the pieces. Like you need Zandalicini. You need Tiffany Hayes to keep this within inside the number. Now, the Aces have tweaked their lineup a little bit, right? They're starting Kirsten Bell. They're starting Alyssa Smith, who they acquired midseason. Do you think? And then Jewel Lloyd's off the bench. Is this a buy low stretch at all for the Aces? Now, they got killed on Saturday, but that was an early tip time for them, things like that. Is there a part of you that thinks, hey, they still have Asia Wilson, right? They still have Jackie Young. Maybe this team and Becky Hammond is putting the pieces, and this is a team that's a bet on team second half of the year.
Well, maybe not in this spot necessarily, because by the way,
Right.
this is the one quick road game, obviously not a far travel, but then you've got a homestand. You've got Seattle, Connecticut, New York, and the Seattle, of course, Jewel Lloyd's old team, and they played once, I think, like the first week or two of the season back in May, and Seattle took it to them, won by 20 up there. So there was some acrimonious feelings there, between the two teams, I think. So Aces, I think, that's going to be a game, obviously, that they really want in terms of a payback spot against Seattle, and then they have Connecticut and New York. So I just don't like the spot necessarily for the Aces, even though, to your point, I think it has been better for Jewel Lloyd, the aforementioned Jewel Lloyd, to come off the bench. And you've seen her, I think, perform a little bit better now. She had that spike game last time out, I think, where she had 27. So people keep betting the unders, but she's actually been, I think, more effective off the bench than she has certainly as a starter. So at least in the interim, and look, I think the Aces have a very limited ceiling long term, but I think having Bell in that lineup probably has been better, and they've seemed to have played a little bit better of late.
I think they're playing tougher. I think that's what Hammond wanted to do. I think some of this team was just like, oh, we have Asia. We can kind of just play off of her, things like that. They needed some want to and some edge. And frankly, someone like Jewel Lloyd, who's a little bit of a black hole when you pass the ball around and things like that. So instead of trying to get her to share with Jackie Young and Asia and change her style completely, because playing alongside Asia Wilson, who's so good in her prime, versus playing alongside NECA is going to be very different. So I think she did the right move. So sometimes it's just about fit, and Becky Hammond's regarded as a good coach. And I think you're right. Maybe not tonight, but I think there are going to be aspects where it's good to bet on this team, so to speak. Anything on the total? Anything along those lines?
Well, last time out, of course, the Aces put up 101, so 101.77. But we know Golden State, one of the better defensive teams in the league, and I think especially at home. I think that they've kind of figured out ever since Thornton got injured, they're not going to make the playoffs. I think. I know they want to pace and space, and that's the offense they want to run, but they don't have the personnel, I think, to fully implement that. So I think that you're seeing them maybe needing to try to muck it up a little bit, because we know that the talent in terms of depth on the roster, and it's never going to be there for an expansion team, is not there. So you saw, like, the last time out, ignore the Vegas game on Sunday against Chicago, 73-66, very low scoring game by WNBA standards. 68-67 against Washington. had 152 against Atlanta, and that thing died in like the final 3 minutes. I think there was one basket. It was the game winner by the Valkyries in the final 3 minutes. So they are playing a lot of lower scoring games. So I would lean under here. I don't disagree with the market. I think this was 159 as the global opener. You're now seeing 58 at Bet Rivers, some 58 and a half. I don't disagree with that move. I would play under if anything in this one.
Okay. Okay. Good stuff. What about any props that at least your thought process on some of these?
Well, and I was looking, and I in full disclosure, I haven't bet anything as of yet, but wanted to kind of look to see what you first look at the star players, and you know that you're going to get taxed, and I think maybe you are here a little bit with Aja Wilson, but is this a buy low spot? Because the last two games she didn't go over. Now keep in mind the Minnesota game, she got pulled early in the third quarter, so that's why she only had 10. And then that was a blowout against the Valkyries where that was well done middle of the third quarter, and she only had 14. So if you think that this is going to be a more competitive game, do you go with the over? And that's 21 and a half, because you're never really getting a break on Aja Wilson, but that would be the lean I would have. Now she did have 14 rebounds, by the way, against the Valks on Sunday, so you're getting 9.5 juice to the over all over the place. So I don't like to always play these stars over, but one of the things you have to realize with some WNBA props is these teams are only playing 8, 9 players. So you will see heavy minutes, even if they're not necessarily competitive games, unless they're totally lopsided, like the last two were. Like if the Aces are up 10 or down 10, that's a competitive game. So they're not going to all of a sudden, oh, it's between 10 and 15, and we're just going to take them out. If they're down 40, that's what they're going to do. And that's what Becky Hammond did do. So, just the minute distribution, because I'm learning a little bit as I'm looking at these props, and it's like, oh man, this looks under. And then all of a sudden they get put back in the game. So you're trying to figure out like these rotations with a lot of these teams. So I think Aja Wilson, I would lean over 21 and a half, even though you're paying that price here. With Jewel Lloyd, by the way, there has been some movement on her prop down to like 11 and a half. I would not follow that movement because I think she's been better off the bench. So maybe if it keeps going down, there's a buy low to continue that way on Jewel Lloyd. So nothing that I bet, but I'm continuing to look throughout the afternoon.
I mean, don't you kind of throw out some of the stats from last Sunday, just given the spot for the Aces and everything that transpired? I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to use that as a baseline with a lot of my props. And speaking of props, give WNBA same game parlays a shot tonight with the second chance parlay promotion. Opt in and get up to 50% of your bet back if your three-leg WNBA same game parlay loses. See the Bet Rivers app for more details. And I know, Wes, you're not a huge SGPer, but there's some interesting options. Jewel Lloyd to make a three, and then Jackie Young to make at least two is plus money, plus 112. Just throwing it out there. It's tough with the Valks because they spread the ball out so much, but I don't think much of this Aces defense. I think the Aces are going to come in a little fat and happy. If anything, I'd be playing maybe the Valkyries first quarter, something like that. They're a great first half ATS team, so I think that might be my play a little bit on this game, first quarter, something like that.
Okay, yeah, I could certainly see that. One more thing on the Wilson prop, because I was just looking through some past numbers. You are getting, I think, maybe a little bit of a discount here, 21 and a half. And part of that is because the Valkyries defense is one of the better ones in the league, but she'd been 22 and a half each of the last two games, and of course goes way under due to obvious circumstances with both those games being blown out. So she's starting, and that's sometimes what I want to do. And if you're following these player prop markets, I think you got to follow where it's like, okay, buy the dip, sell the high. Like last
Sure.
night, I want to give an example on sell the high, and keep it germane to the discussion. But like Kayla McBride, going back to that blowout game on Saturday, last night was a very good sell spot at under 17 and a half, 16 and a half on the points, because Kayla McBride, if you call, what was she, 8 of 8 in the first half from the 3-point line against the Aces? One of the reasons why
I
the
mean,
Lynx,
yeah.
yeah. So you get those outlier performances, and then that's when you have to sell off. And then when you have like an injury, like to somebody like to Nafisa Collier, Okay, well, somebody's got to replace that scoring. So therein lies, playing overs on people like Courtney Williams or now Dejanay got traded, Dejanay Carrington from Dallas, so she got some minutes and had a very good debut for the Lynx, by the way, last night. So that's what you got to look at when you're looking at these player props instead of what you were saying, just stats. You've got to look at where the market has gone and if there's outlier performances, buying the lows, selling the highs, and I think long term you're going to be successful if you're able to do that.
Yeah, and I was talking about the Valks in the first quarter. Here's the problem with some of this stuff. So the Valkyries are +1 at Bet Rivers for the first quarter, -108. But Asia Wilson plays the entire first quarter. So I think the line value would be the first half line because she doesn't return the game until halfway through the second quarter. So remember, these odds makers figure out the game line, right? And then everything is commensurate with that. So first quarter and first half are off the game line. So I think there's line value when you have someone like Asia Wilson who steps off, so to speak, and you have extreme line value in my eyes. So that's something to keep in mind in that regard. And Ryan Huffman chimes in. I can't figure this game out. I want to go Valks, but 4 players on injury report on the Aces side, they can't be trusted. And that's what we're talking about, right? Like you can't really trust the Aces because the spot is terrible for them. But you also don't want to jump on the Valkyries because they have so many injuries. And yeah, they just reload. I remember talking to a really sharp WNBA handicapper, and I was asking him, I think this was last weekend about Xanda Lassini, and I'm like, "Yeah, but I think she's out." He's like, "Does it really matter with this team?" I'm like, "That's a good point." I mean, I know what he's meant, but at some point there's a drop off, right? Yes, Kate Martin can go bonkers and things like that, but at some point there's a drop off. Steve from Lynn says Valkyries first quarter under over Asia points parlay plus 850. I'm going to put some pizza money on it. Yeah, I mean, look, you can play with some numbers. I think you kind of throw out the baseline of last Sunday, just given the spot. Adam Osimo says Jackie Young over 15 and a half points. She dropped 20 on them this past Sunday, 30 on them last month. And that last month game was a high scoring game late. Valkyries it was a Saturday afternoon, I believe. They were scoring a bunch, chucking threes, really backdoor covered, depending on the overnight line. So I could get behind the Jackie Young thing. I just think it's a really tough handicap with so many moving parts.
Yeah, I do as well. And she's been 15 and a half. I think the last 4 games she's gone over 3 or 4. The only one she didn't go over, of course, was the game against the Lynx, where the Lynx were up like 40 at the third quarter. And yeah, you had kind of an unfortunate break where Nafisa Collier gets hurt before they could take her out. But anyway, like Jackie Young has to be the second scorer. I think it can't just be all Aja Wilson because you're just not going to get consistent scoring out of Chelsea Gray. I don't think I think Chelsea Gray is well on the back nine of her career, shall we say, trying to say it as respectfully as I can. And Lloyd has been a little bit better off the bench, but you just don't have the scoring. Melissa Smith is can have a spike game every once in a while, but she's not really there to score. And you've got young players like Nye, like Kirsten Bell that are kind of going to be very, very hit or miss. So I think Young, you're pretty much getting what you're getting. So I think at 15 and a half, that's probably the right price. I didn't see any real value either way.
Okay. I can get behind all that. Let me ask you this as we shift to the futures market, but also want to remind our audience a lot of good content here on the Bet Rivers Network. A new show posted this morning, Betting Weekly Game Bet Match with Nigel Seeley and Sean Calvert, previewing the men's semifinals at the ATP Toronto event. Shelton Fritz and Zverev Kakanov. So I apologize if I'm butchering some of the names. I'm not on that show because I'm not a tennis expert, but you should listen to Nigel and Sean. They do a wonderful job. So check that out for sure. You mentioned the Mystics making a trade, playing the long game. I think I don't want to say punting on this year, but they're certainly not making a push for the playoffs this year. There's a domino effect, I think, because of that. Valkyries, the yes, no to make the playoffs, -148 the yes, the no +108. Now, the Sparks are in the mix here too, and they've had a nice little run of late. What do you think of the Valkyries ahead of tonight's game? minus 148 to make the playoffs.
Ah, man, I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment based on what I saw last night, but the Sparks offensively are starting to look like a pretty dynamic group. And part of that is because of the pace that Lynn Roberts wanted to play, and installing that with them. And they had some growing pains. But the Sparks, to me, I would take the Sparks over the Valkyries right now for
Okay.
the 8 or 9. And I usually value defense more than offense, but I think the Sparks just have so many scorers on this team. Not only KP, Kelsey Plum, but Azure Stevens is stepping up. Rakia Jackson has had like 3 or 4 big games in a row where she's been massively inconsistent. And then, of course, Derica Hamby. And you're getting Cameron Brink back. You're not seeing that on the offensive end yet, but defensively, she's blocking shots, she's getting rebounds, and has been nice energy down low. And she also can relieve some of the bigs that sometimes can get into foul trouble for LA. So the Sparks to me are just they look like they're playing better basketball. They lost that game to the Aces after they won a few in a row against some of the lower teams, but I was willing to dismiss that because they
They'd
keep
won
playing.
5. They'd won
Yeah,
5 straight at the time. They were feeling
yeah.
themselves a little bit.
Yeah, and so the Aces got him, and wish I would have bet that, but I just think that they're playing better ball, and I think that they just have more firepower. And you need to score it. You need to score in this league, and you need to have multiple scores, and I think that they do, and I don't think that the Valkyries have that right now.
Okay, so right now, the Sparks are a game back of the Valkyries, who currently have the 8th seed. Okay, so the Valkyries are the 8th seed, Sparks are the 9th. They had a nice win over the Fever last night. Good spot for LA. And that's where we stand right now. And we're on the back half of the season, but still plenty of time left, like 18 or so games. So you would say, would you play the no on the Valks?
I would lean that way, yes.
I'm gonna have
Yes.
to sneeze soon, so that's the beauty of live TV.
Okay. Well, then I'll keep
Excuse
I'll
me.
I'll keep talking.
At least I
But
spared everyone the noise because I had the mute button hit real quickly. So the reason I asked that, and we should mention, just throwing it out there, the Aces for the 7 seed are only a half game up on the Valkyries. So there is a scenario, whether it's 5%, 20%, whatever it is, where both the Valkyries and Sparks get in and the Aces do not. And the Storm are only a game up on the Valkyries. So there's a little bit of a logjam down there. And there's a world, again, could be 1%, where those teams get in. And even the Mystics, while they traded their best player, I think, Brittany Sykes, that they get in. Uh, Although look at the Mystics, minus 670 after the Brittany Sykes trade, and they're going to go try to run the offense through Sonia Citron, or maybe
mhm.
even Sugg, and then play some, Lucy Olson a little bit more. I agree. They're trying to figure out their core, their young core for the future. But there's a chance with the good coach and Sid Johnson that they stumble into the postseason, especially if Asia Wilson gets hurt again or things like that. Now, this is the futures market, and there's tiers, like I said. Lynx and Liberty co-favorites right now. Bet Rivers plus 150. Next tier, Mercury, Dream, Fever, who've certainly looked the part, and obviously we expect Caitlin Clark to return at some point. And then that next tier with the Storm and Aces. But in terms of the playoff seeding and all that, they can, there could be some wild stuff the rest of the way. So I'm not punting on some of these teams. I mean, the Aces looked all world, but let's not forget how they looked on Saturday as well.
Right,
So
right.
as good as they look. So these, yes, that's what I think makes this yes no stuff so interesting. Like, I do think there's quote unquote value on the Mystics minus 670. I'm just not going to rush to bet it because a lot of wonky stuff can happen. Would you bet the Sparks at plus 117? Because I think that's where you're headed.
I would, because I think of those teams that they're just right there and they're playing good ball and how explosive they are offensively, and they're a tough pace. And I know it's been a couple games without Clark, but it was tough for the Fever, who can run. It was tough for them to keep pace last night. And I think it will be tougher for other teams going forward for the rest of the season. You mentioned trade deadline. I think Sparks, probably with the way they're playing, they're going to stand pat. The Aces, I don't think, can do any more than they've already done, really, from a trade deadline standpoint. I just don't think they have the assets necessarily, to attract somebody right now. But you brought up the Mystics. I don't think the Mystics, they might not be done selling. They might because we've heard Aaliyah Edwards all season, and she's basically out of the rotation. We've heard her all season. This was what was she, the number 2 pick in the draft just a couple years ago? And so somebody might say, "Hey, well, she's young. We can do something with her." Uh, Emily Ingsler might be traded, or Stephanie Dolson, who
I think
you've mentioned.
Shakira Austin's the first name I think of.
She would be the one that I think would attract the most value. I don't know if they want to part with her necessarily, but Dolson, Edwards, Engsler. So I don't know. I feel like the Mystics probably are looking to make another trade. Now you got to find, okay, who the buyers are right now. I think Seattle and Phoenix are clearly by like Phoenix. I think could be a logical place if the Mystics want to make a trade. But a lot of these teams that are buyers, they're trying to find 3-point shooting. That's obviously not something the Mystics, I guess, really have to trade. Maybe Steph Dolson,
No
for
one
some
wants her.
bench depth,
No
but
one.
I don't think that's going to bring.
No
I
one
don't.
wants
That
her.
seems like a non-starter. So they're the ones that are the buyers. Obviously, the teams at the bottom are the buyers. I think Connecticut is certainly a seller, and they're probably going to get calls on Bria Hartley, on Marina Mabry for certain. Same with Dallas, Hines Allen, Arike Ogunbowale. I think it might be out there to be acquired with the Sky, Rachel Banham, if you're looking for a 3-point shooter, and some of these teams are. So that's what you
I
got to
think
look at.
she should be. I think somebody should go get her. I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
She's automatic. I mean, people made it. Mabry was traded last year around the deadline, if I'm not mistaken. So I think there's opportunity there. Um, I don't know. I will say this. I think this is what makes the trade deadline so fascinating. Is a lot of contracts, like tons, all are set to expire this year because of the looming collective bargaining renegotiations with we all know pay us what you owe us, and the TV deal kicks in. So a lot of agents were smart and didn't make any deals based on the current payroll structures and salary cap and things like that. So you're going to have over 100 free agents this offseason, and we're going to see a ton of movement. We saw a ton of movement last summer because of so many big names moving. So all these are going to be rentals that are available now. Teams aren't going to give up their young talent, like Caitlin Clark's not going to be traded. Sonia Citron's not going to be traded. Things like that. Paige Beckers isn't going to be traded as a rental. But you're going to have some nice pieces that are available, like Rachel Banham. I think can really help a contender,
Hmm.
and I think it's fairly wide open. I mean, obviously the Lynx look special this year. Liberty, when they get healthy, if and when, they'll be really good, one would think. But I do think the Dream, the Storm, the Mercury, like there's a path to make a run
They're the
and things
three
to
that
break
need to
out.
be the buyers right now, in my
Right.
opinion. You just listed them
What
there,
about
and
the Aces? What about the Aces?
I don't know what they have to really trade. I feel like they kind of are what they are. I think they're kind of stuck a little bit in limbo here, and I don't
Yeah,
know
you're
if they
right.
would.
They don't have young pieces to trade, or if they have picks, they have
Yeah,
picks.
and that's what that's going to have to be involved here, and that's what makes it attractive for some of these teams like the Mystics. It's like, hey, we got a really good young core. Hey, let's go try to get steal another pick out of somebody. But what you mentioned in terms of those 3 teams, the Dream, the Storm, and the Phoenix Mercury, need to be making calls on Rachel Banham, need to be making calls on Marina Mabry, Rebecca Allen, who was with the Mercury, of course, last season. Maybe there's an opportunity for a return there. Another thing I think the Sky will be doing as soon as Angel gets back, because you got the 2 bigs with her and Cardoso. If somebody needs a veteran big down low and help with rebounding, maybe Elizabeth Williams could be available from the Chicago Sky. But yeah, Mabry and I think the other shooters out there, they're the ones, Rachel Banham, they're the ones I think that are going to be in the most demand here at the deadline over the next 24 hours.
So, futures market, would you want to be officially down on the Sparks? Yes, to make the playoffs plus
Yes.
117.
Yes, I think they're getting that 7 or 8 spot. I don't. And it's not just one game because I did watch that game closely with the Fever last
Sure.
night, and saw what was thrown on the floor with a certain player saying, "Hey, don't throw those," and they threw it right at her. Of course, Sophie Cunningham spurred that on, but I was watching that game very closely, and look, I know the final score indicated that hey, it might have been a close game. Sparks were up well over 20 in the
Yeah.
fourth quarter. They were blowing the Fever out. And Kelsey Mitchell had a terrific game, and the Fever just could not keep up. That's the type of game where they probably really miss Caitlin Clark in terms of if it's going to be a herky jerky up tempo game. That's where the Fever guards I think can be had with Caitlin sitting there on the bench in street clothes. So you really saw that last night. So I was impressed with the Sparks. I think that they moved the ball very well. Kelsey Plum still got her shots, but she got her assists. She had double-digit assists last night. So she did a very nice job running the offense. And then I think these young pieces like Rakia Jackson, I think just continue to improve and improve. So I think that the Sparks may have something. I don't know if they have something to make a run in the playoffs, but I think they have enough to get there.
Okay, so you're officially down for plus 117 on the yes for the Sparks to make the playoffs. I think that's a really sharp play. I'm gonna get a little get involved a little bit with the Valkyries. Like I talked about the line value, how there's line value on the first half, not necessarily the first quarter because of Asia Wilson's substitution pattern. So I'm going to take first half plus 2.5 for the Valks minus 115, but I'm only going to do a quarter unit. Usually it's a half unit. I'll just do a quarter unit, small play. I think there's some line value there. I'll get involved. That'll be my lone play for tonight. But the first quarter is tempting because I do think they jump on them. But I think because of Asia Wilson playing the entire first quarter, I think there's more line value in the first half. But you get Jewel Lloyd off the bench, and but I just think the Valkyries. I think there's better line value. You want to bet this game, the largest percentage you can find when Asia Wilson's not on the court. I think
Hmm.
that's the way to do it. So if there's a way to bet second quarter live, I would bet the Valkyries. The problem with that pre-flop is that, or live bet, is that the game score. So the Valkyries are up 5. I don't want to necessarily bet the Valkyries second quarter because they'll be like
Right.
plus, then you're laying 3 for the half, and that's not what you want to do because game flow and frankly the officiating takes into account the score. Sometimes they're influenced by the crowd as well. So, but yeah, I mean, if you can bet a quarter line with Asia Wilson only playing half the quarter, that's usually a wise wager because, and I've talked to odds makers, they laugh. They're like, yeah, we're just probably lazy about this. First quarter, first half are just commensurate with the game line. But if you can isolate a portion or a stretch where Asia's off the court, I mean, that's a huge, huge factor. So that's part of this equation in my eyes. Let me ask you this, Wes, and I'm going to throw this on you. Nafisa Collier's out only for a couple of weeks, but it's only 4 games. She was overwhelmingly a favorite to win the MVP. The market repositioned of this weekend at like minus 200, and now it's minus 715. Alyssa Thomas has gone from like 6 to 1 to plus 295, right? And then Sabrina's gone from like 100 to 1 to 28 to 1. The Lynx get the nice win last night. Alyssa Thomas gets a triple double. Does what the Lynx did last night hurt Fee's chances to win MVP? Because they look so good and they take care of business without her. And it's only 4 games, and she's widely considered the runaway favorite. I just think there's a conversation to be had, whether it's bet Alyssa Thomas because she's carrying the Mercury to maybe the second seed, or Nafisa Collier's a discount even at minus 715.
I don't think it helps, but I don't think it hurts necessarily. I don't want to give like a cop out answer here, but I think Nafisa Collier is the MVP of the league, and I think it's not just what she is producing on the court; it's what she's also doing off the court. Because there's a now the new audience doesn't vote; it's the media that votes, but there's a new audience coming into the WNBA, and I think that they can be nothing but impressed by Nafisa Collier, not only her play, but look, people are human beings and they vote different ways. Nafisa Collier off the court, I think, is like a pretty damn good leader and a pretty darn good example. Started unrivaled, of course, with the help of Stewie, but
Good point.
Nafisa Collier was basically the leader of that. So what did that do? That allowed a lot of these WNBA players to make money and not have to go overseas to make the money. Let's not forget one of the stars and certainly, a Hall of Famer for a career in the league was held captive by an enemy combatant or at least an adversary of this country just a couple years ago. So that plays into people's minds, not only in terms of the unrivaled, but I think she's been very complimentary of a lot of the young players and has been cool in terms of talking to them and giving them advice, whether it's Angel Reese, whether it's Caitlin Clark, whether it's Cam Brink or whoever it may be, has been very good about that. And is just, I think carries herself well and is a very good example and very well liked and respected. Like it seems like everybody is cool with Fee. Like
Oh, yeah.
all the different factions in the WNBA, whether you divide by race or by sexual orientation or geography, however you want to divide human beings up, everybody's cool with her, like every faction, and then she's part of the Yukon legacy. So she's part of that Yukon clique, which very much sticks together in the WNBA. Let's not discount that. So I know the odds have dipped and I know Thomas put up really good numbers, but I think Fee is so darn likable and she's been such a key for that team and a leader for that team and really in the league. It'll be very hard for me to see her not win this award.
Okay. So minus 715, I think has value. That's why I brought it up. Now, I'm not in a rush to tie up money for a while, but it's only about a month and a half. It's not 4 months. And she did escape significant injury with it's a sprain. Now, sprain is sort of a minor tear. We all know the technical thing of that, but it's 4 games in a 44 game season. No big deal. She's the core. And everything you said, Wes, I completely agree. There is an outside, non basketball or non on the court related component to this. And frankly, the Lynx are people, I don't want to say pity them, but there's a little bit of a makeup factor to what happened last year in the finals with the officiating and how it all went down in game 5. So there's a little bit of a consolation prize that's in the back of people's minds. And just the narrative, whether it be columns for reporters at the midseason point, at the All-Star break, things like that. Like she's what I think it's 715's cheap. Honestly, I really do. I think it should be
Hmm.
minus 15. I think it should be minus 1500.
And
Once
it could go down more too if Thomas
once
keeps
you learn that
producing.
she escaped like big injury, I think that's a banger. I really
Hmm.
do. Um uh it, it just is what it is. I just think the way it's all gonna play out, I think that's the play.
Yeah, look, and maybe if Thomas gets a couple more performances like that, because I think based on what you were saying, 2 weeks for Collier. So I'm looking at the schedule. Of course, they have the game with Washington on Friday night, and then they got three straight with the Liberty, who they faced in the NBA Finals last year. So maybe that last Liberty game on the 19th, or maybe that game at Atlanta is when I guess she would tentatively be scheduled to return. But if Thomas gives you another couple performances and the Mercury are right there in the top four, maybe this drops a little. I don't think it's a precipitous drop, but we've already kind of had that, so I don't see this getting like below under 500. I just can't see that.
Well, it could. It could. You never know. And I'll say this: if there is a player, that's the problem with laying this kind of lumber. If there's a player to unseat Fee, I think it's Alyssa Thomas because she should have won the MVP a couple years ago. Now I stood to win 6 figures, so I'm still bitter. But she had the most first place votes that year. She's been on the cusp of an MVP. She does pass the smell test to a certain extent. So if there's someone to unseat her, I don't think it's Sabrina Nescu. I think it could be Alyssa Thomas, but she would need she's the only player in WNBA history who's had a triple double in back-to-back games. So she clearly checks some boxes, and if Phoenix continues to climb, it could happen. But I still think Fee is going to ultimately win it because the Lynx are going to get some respect. And Cheryl Reeve won Coach of the Year last year, so she's not going to get that award. So, all the reasons you mentioned, I just thought it was worth touching that topic. So we have one game on the slate tonight, and we touched on it. I'm on a quarter unit on the Valks plus for first half plus 2.5. And Wes's lone play today is the Sparks, yes, to make the playoffs plus 117. Yet, Wes, you and I are back on the show tomorrow with 3 games on tomorrow's night's slate. So we'll break those down tomorrow on Betting Weekly Fast Break again Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Don't forget, Betting Weekly Hardball as well. That is 2 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. That is also 11 a.m. Pacific. So that's going to do it for this episode. We appreciate everyone chiming in on the conversation. We saw a lot there in the comments section. We'll get to it tomorrow again. Wes and I back in the hot seat tomorrow. So until then, for Wes Reynolds and everyone behind the scenes who does such a wonderful job making us look good, the producing, the directing, the research, the graphics, I'm Doug Kezirian. Good luck to your wagers tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.